I hope I have enough space on here to record. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. I know a couple people are coming later and a couple people are not going to be in range of internet for a little while, so they'll be coming later as well if they can. So thank you all for meeting with me tonight. And I apologize for ducking out so early the last the last time, and also for getting to meet with you each individually over the last couple weeks to get you started on your research project. So the first thing I want to do is see if any of you have any really pressing questions on your data collection or anything like that that is going on that you're struggling with, or that you don't know how to deal with, or that's not going how you thought it would.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is there a minimum, like minimum number of people to interview, minimum?
You're supposed to have 45 minutes of interview, 45 minutes of observation, I think, or else an hour of observation. But like whenever I was talking with all of you, I'm willing to be flexible with that if you have, an hour and a half of observation, or hour and a half of observation, then your interview could be a little bit less. Or if your interview is a little bit more, then your observation time could be less. And if you really don't have anyone that you can observe live, we can always work out some kind of way to observe it digitally, where you're, looking at blog posts, or you're looking at a Twitter feed over a period of time, or discussions in a forum for something. So we can also work that out as observation if necessary. So the number of documents, no, I don't have anything on that. I'd just like you to have one document at least.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So if the interview has to be a total of 45 minutes, can it be two different people being interviewed within the 45 minutes, like 20 minutes and 25 minutes for the other person?
Or you can have 10 people, 4 minutes each.
Okay. Thank you.
It's just to give you some practice with interviewing and drawing out the answers that you think you might want to have, and really just pushing at people, even if they're really friendly with you or friends of you, of being able to say to them, they give you an answer and you're able to say, well, how would you reframe that? Or would you like to explain that a little bit more? Or could you go a little deeper with that? Those kind of things, so you can get to the data that you think you want to have for your research things. Having somebody that's friendly is always helpful sometimes, even though you know what they mean. So sometimes it's a little harder whenever you actually sit down and look at what they actually said. You know what they meant, but they really didn't say that. It's just to give you practice. So as long as it's approximately there, you have two people that are doing, 20 minutes each, and you're at 40 minutes, I'm fine with that. If you have two people and they're 10 minutes total, then we need to talk about ways to get more data, because that's not going to give you enough to actually base anything on.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Any other questions? How are you doing? Have you talked to people? Have you started interviewing? Have you started looking, doing observations? Any of the kind of things that you had planned out? Or are you still kind of trying to get people to work with you on it?
I have my schedule for this weekend coming up, and so the participants have been on vacation, so I have my schedule for this weekend.
Okay. So this is a great time to start working on your lit review, broadening and deepening some of your things there, getting it, formatted so that you can just all slap it together at the last minute.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Nah?
I have pretty much collected all my data insofar as I've interviewed two people. I had three. I had a third one lined up, and I started the transcribing on the first one before I'd done the third interview, and I found it so excruciatingly tedious that I said to the third person, do you mind if I don't interview you? I have got enough. I've got, the 45 minutes. I've done my observation, just the notes. I haven't summarized them or anything, and I've collected my documents. I'm not having any problems so far, mostly because I'm so completely overwhelmed at the moment by everything going on in my life before I leave for Toronto that I'm not going to complain about all of that right now. So it's going well insofar as I've got my data, and I just got to push on with it.
And you don't have to transcribe your entire conversation with people. You don't have, I hope you didn't already. Did you already do the entire?
No, I will readily confess I skipped chunks, and it helped me, as you know, as you and I discussed, my scope was pretty big for this project, and so it made it easy to decide which chunks to skip, and therefore skip in the second interview when I started transcribing. So that's I got about half an hour out of the first person, and the second person whose interview went shorter anyway, with 38 minutes total. I'll easily just on around the 45 minutes, I think.
That's fine. And
Yeah.
I asked you for approximately 20 minutes of transcribed interview or transcribed observation in the final document. So with all of that, yeah, you don't have to transcribe everything out of everything. And I'll show you a piece of that in just a second. But what you can do is if you're interviewing someone and you're going down through and you have your set of questions and you're, asking them as you go so you don't lose your place or whatever, then it's easy to put like a check mark beside the ones that you're like, that's a good answer. And then if you have it recorded for yourself that you're able to go back through, then all you have to do is kind of skip to that question, and the bits that are really fitting into your framework or the ones that are really like rich, meaty answers, then you can just pick them to look at first. And then you can kind of go through and look at confirming evidence and things like that. Look for people that said the same sort of thing. Some people call this cherry picking. So they'll say, oh, you're just cherry picking your data. You're just picking the pieces that support it. But there's actually a lot of research that has gone into video research in particular that talks about doing this. So I typically use Jordan and Henderson as my person for justifying why I do it this way. And I'm a little scattered today. I was telling Regina whenever we were the first ones in that my daughter got married on Saturday and my aunt passed away today. So I've been really out of the loop. And if Natalie wouldn't have texted me or messaged me and said, I'm going to be late for class, I would have probably blown you guys off tonight. As you can see, I'm sitting in what used to be my brother's basement room. So I'm a little scattered tonight.
Don't feel too bad. I literally woke up 5 to 7 and turned on my iPad and Blackboard notification said Zoom. I was like,
I had a lot of things planned that I didn't remember my drive, so I'm going to be winging it with transcripts and things like that instead of showing the actual video that goes with this project. All right, so whenever you're doing this, though, if you have the interview, you can keep track of where you're at with the questions. You know that, if they answered them well or not, because if you've done any of your data collection, you know that some of the questions give you really great answers and some of the questions you're like, that's not what I'll ask again. And then when you do your second interview, you can kind of just like, circle it, maybe save this one for the end if we have time or, something like that, because it didn't really give you what you thought you wanted. Maybe it was the wording or you had to change that, or, their answer just was like kind of blah and not anything that was going to really be helpful to you. So especially with observation, if you're observing a classroom or observing people in training or professional development sessions, people in a museum, any of these kind of things for long periods of time, you definitely don't want to transcribe like 6 hours of a field trip. So what you do is you'll use, Jordan and Henderson use this interaction analysis. And what they basically do is say, as you go down through as you're going down through your data, you're identifying what's known as critical events. And so, students are doing blah, 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 blah. Here's a critical event. I'm going to show you that in one of my transcripts here in a few minutes. So the critical event is something that's like, this is a big aha moment. It might be something that fits your research question, or it could be something that you're like, this is something that was totally unexpected, so I've got to really wrap my head around what it means. Or it can be something that is like, this fits all the data that I've seen with other things and, kind of rounds out my, the data that I'm collecting or something like that. But they're called critical events that you're looking at. And then you just transcribe those pieces. So, if you collect, like for my dissertation, for the research project I'm going to show you, we collected, I think we have 47 or 48 hours of data, observational data that we collected from in classroom and on a field trip and students working on their computers and things like that. But a lot of the case study work that we do really wraps around like 6 hours of video total. So we've identified the events that went with each of these different sets of research questions, and then we just pick those pieces for that. So I'm going to share, whoops, hold on. I've got to pull them up so that they'll share for you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Ask while I'm pulling these pieces up.
I'm not sure if my observation sort of turned out the way an observation should be. Insofar as my plan was to do the observation during a team meeting, and it was just a subsection of our whole office. It was just the learning design section, and normally our supervisor sort of goes through a few issues, and then each learning designer gives an overview of what they're working on and stuff. And it was going to be easy for me to, apart from giving my own report, to sort of sit back and listen and write. And it got changed up. The new director came and ran a session with us. She's also the new Pro-Vice Chancellor of Teaching and Learning, and she's shaking up our whole university in a fantastic way and rolling out this massive push on blended learning. And ran this session, and I had been asked to work up a document on threshold standards for blended learning for the university, and she was going through all of this, and I had to be really engaged in this whole conversation, and she got us to answer questions and stuff. And so I wrote a lot of stuff down, but it was less this person said this or this happened. It was more my interpretation of a theme that came out of the exchanges that just happened, and I worried that my notes that I ended up with were much more subjective than an observation should be, because they were my interpretation of what people had just come out with.
Okay, so that highlights two things. Number one, it highlights why it's really nice to have like a voice recorder, even if you don't have a video recording, but a voice recorder just there, or you're able to pull an app or do it on something to collect all of that, so you don't have to be so worried about it. But if you don't have that, what you have then is actually a field note instead of really, like an observation kind of protocol. And those are totally acceptable within qualitative research as a data source. And as you said, because they're more subjective, you'll frame out what you're actually working with, and, kind of the, not even in your paper necessarily, but within the field note, you want to kind of take notes and remind yourself, this is what was going on, this is what I see, this is how it works together, and then try and note your actual observations and then your interpretations of it. With different, a lot of times people will say like observation, and then they'll put their field note, like their interpretation in the side column or something like that. But it's that happens, and that really highlights as well the real the quantitative work appears to be much more cut and dried. You set up these nice little research experiments and you have your perfect little groups that are perfectly matched with all these parameters, and you set them up and they do this test and that test, and then you compare your results and you have a statistical analysis that says this or this. And it looks like it's really cut and dry. And then you come to qualitative research and you have, especially whenever you're doing it with training or with classroom settings or with real people in real work situations, you end up with these big, messy, complex kind of problems where nothing works the way it's supposed to you half the time. And so with that, what you have to do is just the best you can. You document what all is going on, and you just make sure that you have it framed so you don't forget, oh yeah, this is the day that the camcorder decided to, run out of battery 10 minutes into the period and I didn't notice it for 25 minutes. Or this is, the day that so-and-so had a seizure in class and it all melted down. So, this is just the things that happen with real live research. And a lot of times with a qualitative lens, you are looking at things that are going on in situ, in the heat of the moment, and you really don't have a lot of control over how this person spins it or that person spins it. So you just do the best you can.
I think it really highlighted for me too that if you're not recording or videoing the situation, how hard it is to be a participant in it and pay attention to what's going on and what you're doing in your observation.
Yeah. A lot of times too, that's why people write up their observation protocols ahead of time. They will really focus on, in this whole meeting, I am focusing only on this section. And then the observation protocol stating, this is what I'm looking for, helps you kind of block out everything else that's going on and focus only on that. And it sounds like Joy has a little bit of a, yeah, that happens. Anytime any of you want to cry about how your dissertation data collection is going on, give me a call. I'll give you some stories, like 2 computers crashing, a video camera that because the data couldn't run in, froze and deleted data, and $200 worth of software and 8 hours sitting with a video tech to recover it, sorta, kinda. That was part of it. That's why I had 2 classes instead of 4 classes that I analyzed. So yeah, it happens. But now this is practice stuff. So now in the future, you'll be like, aha, I've got to hit my record button. So what I wanted to show you guys with some of this is, I know people were saying, I'm not sure how to make my coding, my code book, my analysis to kind of look at all of these pieces. So what I want to show you are a couple different little pieces of things and then how it kind of works together. So I think this is the right transcript. Okay, so with this transcript that's right here, this is, I don't have the media file with me, it's on my portable hard drive and I don't have it here at Mom's. So what's happening here is, let's see if this is the right one. Yeah, hold on, let me switch. Okay, so we had this biology field trip project where we were doing watershed work. And we were doing students within the classroom and then students at a field trip, and we were pulling them back across and looking at how the learning and how the students made sense of things within the classroom and then on their field trip, and then how they brought it back to share with others on their wiki. And so we have this transcript, and you can see I'm not doing every single thing that people are doing. It's 14 seconds, 26 seconds, then I skip down to 6 minutes here, 6:36, 7:28. As you're going down the blue things, this is called InkScribe. It is it's a fairly cheap software package. I think it's around $35 or $40 for students if you're only buying one set of it. it's what my advisor was using at the time. It works pretty well just to transcribe things. You have access to NVivo through the virtual lab for free. I know nothing about NVivo currently. I took a 3-hour workshop on it about 6 years ago. So that's my learning on NVivo. I've not gotten caught up on it. I tend to use InkScribe to transcribe, or VNote that I was giving you guys to work with. And then I use something called Atlas TI to do a lot of my pulling together of the different pieces is what I use Atlas for. So anyway, this is them talking about it, and the students are talking right here about getting pictures of the bugs, and this is their conversation. They don't know what it is. Like guy 2 right here is muffled. I can't hear what he's saying. Let's see if I can show you where I'm at. Okay. So like right here where it has guy 2, it was totally muffled. You can't hear what he's saying. You can't read his lips. You can't even like fathom what it is. So we just noted in there that that was a problem. And then the students are talking. They're all in a clump around this little group of a kick net with the macroinvertebrates in it. And so they're talking about the pictures and how they are taking pictures of this. And I have pictures of this where they're working on it. I have pictures of us working on it, and how they're working with that. And they're counting their data. And so this is just transcribing what they're saying kind of generally. When we went back to do our really important pieces, the little timestamps are where we were saying, this is a critical event. We want to look at this more closely. When we went back to actually put it into the paper, we went back through and we were looking at the transcripts much more closely. And we were being very careful to write exactly what they said and how they said it, with any gestures or pointing and things like that wrapped into it. Okay, so this is what my transcript looked like for that project. I'll screencastify is awesome. Okay. So from this then, closing it and bringing up something else for you. So from these transcripts of InkScribe and approximately 8 or 10 hours of what we did, we went to then 2 different frameworks, and we used 2 different papers on epistemic agency, which is students empowering themselves to, when students empower themselves to construct practice within the classroom or within a learning experience, and also the knowledge that they're working with. It's called epistemic engagement or epistemic agency. And so with this, we were looking at how the students were using digital photography to enact this epistemic agency. So the 2 papers we used, one was from a science ed piece, and one was, okay, so here's the science ed piece right here. And so what we did with this is we looked, make it bigger. This is how I got my code book that we used then. We went through this whole paper on epistemic agency, and we've been reading it for something else. And we were talking about why the students were using the pictures as they were within this study, and how they were taking the pictures. So we went through this paper, and at the end, you see how they're using transcripts here? This is how they're using this to show their evidence. So this is what part of what you'll be doing with your paper, hopefully, is pulling pieces of the transcript to make claims about what you're finding. So whenever I brought it up, it made it move. Okay, so what they did then is they came back down to here and they said, all right, so here are the 5 pieces that students are doing, or that we are finding students do whenever they're enacting this epistemic agency. And so it was things like having the trust and publicizing the science content. And they have a whole, within their discussion, they have these pieces that they've identified that says, okay, they're using epistemic agency within the classroom. Then we went to another framework and found another one, another set with DAMSA. They have a list of 7 practices that they identified with people in the classroom that showed epistemic agency. And what we did then for our coding scheme was to blend these 2 together and say, these are the pieces that we're seeing. These are how we think these students are enacting this epistemic agency. And so, with that paper, this one. And so then when we started writing this up and started looking at how to analyze this data, side here. We had our week, we had the things that were going on with that in the setting. And then for our data analysis, this one doesn't have a table in it. I'm sorry. I only have like 17 versions of the same thing out here. We make sure it has a table in it, and then I'll pull it up. It's the wrong one. I need to start naming things and storing them properly, which is why I tell you guys all the time that you need to have you need to have a data management system, because I'm really, really bad at that. Here's my table. Okay. So what we were doing then was these are all the pieces that we had to, okay, so we took these 5, sorry, I slid my fingers and then it just jumped back. We took these pieces from the straw paper, and these are the 5 things that we started looking at. How, not just what he said was pieces of epistemic agency, but how we were enacting these, how we were looking at how digital photography was found within these epistemic agency moves. So that's whenever I've been saying about the code book, that's like taking your research that you have and pulling these little pieces that you think show what you're trying to answer with your research question, and that's what you're going to be using to code with. So we used these 5 pieces to code with, and then we pulled one more from the DAMSA piece, and we used it as well. And so what we did then, as we were going through these different pieces of transcript, So I'm trying to find the right ones. Like I said, whenever I have 17 versions of it, it doesn't work very well. This one, I think, is the right one. Okay, so when we went down through it, I just had it up and I can't find it now. When we went down through it, what we were looking at then was the transcripts that I'd shown you. In the transcripts, we were identifying each of the phrases that the students were asking and talking about. We were identifying them as being showing evidence of the epistemic agency that the students were enacting as they were, and now I'm crashing. Sorry. My word just crashed. It's not cooperating. Open recent, maybe that'll work. Okay, so what we were doing then as we were going down through this is we were marking these different pieces as being showing evidence of epistemic agency as we went through the transcripts. So for here, this is one of the pieces that was in that transcript that I showed you. The insects are one of these. I managed to break the end off of one. So this was an epistemic agency move where they were questioning. This was making a claim, questioning. And so we were identifying each of these phrases, and it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes it's a whole chunk that shows evidence of something that will all be coded with one piece. So we were looking at each of these things that the students were saying or doing and marking them or identifying them as being showing evidence of these different epistemic agency moves. And then as we went down through, we kind of talked a little bit about what the students were doing in there. And then we also said, you know, they were using this digital photography as a claim documentation tool where they were using it to show that they've came to agreement with this. They've constructed this knowledge versus using it as a way to, you know, take a picture of something and take it back to the classroom so they could identify it. They were identifying what the bug was using their sheet and then taking a picture of it. And so we were making this distinction by using the evidence of how the students were talking previously to this in this section. Okay, so then we went down through more, and then there's really bad formatting, and then here's some more. So what we did with this is the same thing with a later version. We went down through it and we were identifying these as, you know, is this a questioning move? Is this asking for a more information move? These different pieces that aligned with the framework we identified was how we were going through and coding each of the lines of the dialogue. And then we also looked at the pictures and what the content of the pictures were. And so, for example, whenever the students were working, they were taking pictures of the macroinvertebrates that they collected, but they also took a picture of the students that were writing. And one of the students that were writing said, take a picture of us writing, take a picture of the teamwork. And so we are positing with this paper that they are documenting the practices that they were engaged with and themselves with an identity as a scientist because of how they were structuring what they were talking to the other people with. Because they're saying, get us a picture of us writing. They were using that to document the fact that they were participating in science within that picture, not just, goofing around and doing, or, sticking their tongues out or, whatever they were doing with a couple of the other pictures. So they wanted pictures of them being taken as they were participating in the science practices, as well as pictures of the data and themselves kind of goofing around. And so this red writing right here, we're saying through sharing their photographs publicly, they're adding to the understanding that these science practices that they are crafting, the teamwork, the writing, and those kind of things have value and recognition as a science person, as they're formatting their identity as someone who can do science or is available to do science. And so that's kind of where we were at with this whole paper and the pieces that we were trying to put together with it, is that we were using this transcript and the pictures that the students actually took and walking back and forth between them, triangulating the data, even though we only had 2 types of data that were being used there. We had the conversation from the observation, and then we had the photographs as evidence. We were playing back and forth with them as we were trying to write up our analysis of this to show that it wasn't just us picking this one little section of a picture and saying, this is what the students are doing. We were working with their conversation as well to provide evidence of it by looking at the literature that we were drawing upon. And then at the end, what we did with this, I closed that window, so I've got to pull it up again. At the end, what we did with this within the discussion, which is what you're going to try and do with some of your data, although you only have a little bit of data and a little bit of time. So you're not going to have piles and piles of this. And I'm sorry if I'm making you sick by scrolling fast. But whenever you start walking through your discussion, we talk a little bit about the research that has been done. We talk a little bit about the research that has been done. Students did this in this paper before. And then we said, but our students did this and did that instead. And then it says, research says scientists aggregate data, blah, blah, blah. Our students, however, use this to present their data and do the charts and that. And then we say, prior work has shown this is challenging. Yeah, it was challenging. Our kids didn't do it right at all. Okay? Using the photographs as evidence, they didn't include the proper things to do this well. It was a step with the majority of students that skipped. We conclude the students needed additional support in how to use this. So you're taking the research that has been done, see the citations that are within this, sorry, and within these sections, this is what has been done. This is what my students did, or the people that I observed, or the instructional designers that I worked with, or the teachers that I worked with. This is what they did, and this is how they compare. They did the same as them. They provided more evidence on a different age group. They did this a little bit differently. And in this discussion piece, that's what you're doing. You're trying to tie what you got to the actual literature. So you're starting out at the beginning with the literature, and then you have the data that you collected and your analysis of it. That's like the cheese and the meat inside the bread. And then you come back to the literature on the end, and that's your little, paper sandwich. Okay? So you start out with your literature review, you have your data that you collected, the analysis that you have, and then your discussion comes back to the literature again, and that's the bread that sandwiches around what you've done so that you can make this connection for people of where the literature was and how this is an important paper on top of it. Now, with that being said, you've got a very, very short window to collect data. You've got a very, very short time to wrap your head around it and analyze it. I am looking for you to say, this is a quick and dirty analysis. Like, for example, for me, I have new data that I collected in June and July, in June, 3 weeks in June that I've not analyzed very well yet. So I have a conference presentation for AERA due on the 24th. So what I'm doing now is a quick and dirty analysis. I am running through, I'm seeing what I've got that are the big highlights of it. And when I write this up for AERA, I will write it up as, this is the analysis that I have done. These are preliminary findings. And this is how I think it fits into the literature. And really, that's what I'm expecting from you guys from your paper. Okay? I am not expecting you to have 35 pages of really, really finely tuned, in-depth analysis. I am looking for you guys to have an overview of what you've done, an attempt at analyzing it, and basically a really, really good first draft for me of what would be a paper that you would maybe submit somewhere in the future once we have IRB and have more time to collect and analyze. Okay? So don't be really worrying and stressing yourself out over the fact that it's not going to look like an official paper, or that you worry that you don't have enough. You're going to work with what you've got, and we're going to go from there. And if you really find yourself really short on interviews and observations and data and you don't know what to do with it, that'll be one of your meetings with me, and we will figure it out later. We'll figure it out whenever I talk to you. Okay? So with that being said, I need to talk to some of you. Well, I need to talk to all of you one more time over the next 2 weeks, like the rest of this week and next week. Some of you, I have appointments already scheduled. You had a kind of an idea on your time frame of when you were going to collect your data and when you might want to talk. Others, I don't have a set appointment with you. I have 1 or 2 days that I am doing data collection or professional development that I'm kind of blocked off during the daytime. And I don't think we're doing my aunt's funeral actually until after August 15th. So that's, not going to be a concern. So anytime over the next 2 weeks, if you want to sit down with me and show me your analysis and talk through what you think you have, or you think everything is really awesome and you just want to talk to me for 10 minutes and say, this is going great. I've got this going on and I am ready to go and I don't need any more help, that's fine too. Okay? So sometime over the next 2 weeks, I need to talk to you as a requirement of the project. If you need to talk to me more, we can talk more. If you need to talk to me less, then you still have to schedule a couple minutes with me just to say you need to talk to me less. Okay? All right. So after I showed you all of that kind of stuff, and it was kind of a little bit of a sketchy overview of it, but hopefully it showed you just enough of it to be able to kind of see the process. What kind of questions do you have? Do you have anything you have questions about that you want to talk about, that you need more in-depth commentary on it or anything like that? Or do you want to catch up with me later whenever you talk to me personally?
I have what might be a stupid question, but
No
the
stupid
parts
questions.
in the paper that you showed us that were red, why were they red? And
Because we had a revise and resubmit from International Journal of Science Ed, and they said make all changes in a different color font. And so the red and the orange, which as you saw me scrolling through was probably half the paper, has been rewritten, moved around, or reframed. And when I was kind of saying about like the pictures providing evidence and more transcript and how we were identifying those, the first time through on the paper, we did not put those little pieces of terminology in where we were saying epistemic move this, epistemic move that. This is how this piece and the pictures tie together. We had not made that clear, and that was one of the pretty harsh reviews from reviewer number 1 that we got, was that we had not made our analysis very clear. And so we had to go back in and reframe it, very specifically identifying the pieces of the analysis so we could send it back in. And hopefully it'll be better this time. To be honest, I'm expecting another set of revisions and then hopefully be accepted. So, all right, any other questions on any of this?
Hey, Jen, I have a question. Are you expecting or hoping for any appendices, and if so, what would go in them?
Okay, so in the course frame or the course shell in Blackboard, which, you know, you guys all know that I love Blackboard so much, and you all love it so much as well. I'm going to show it to you real quick. In the frame, I have the paper kind of laid out. I have a template there. The template is not formatted in APA or anything like that. I want you to use APA citation style. If you want a style to use for headings and things like that, you can use APA. As long as it makes sense, I'm okay with, I'm not going to dock you on your headings not being all caps, in the middle, centered, 14 font, those kind of things. So clear at the bottom of your course materials. I'll make this nice and big. Clear at the bottom of your course materials. It says overview of final paper. And this has got, you know, module 3, module 1, 2, and 3, and then at the bottom it has this. So this is what your paper is going to be. Single space, 7 to 10 pages, not including references or appendices. I'm not grading beyond 10 pages. If you have 11 pages, I would. If you have 35 pages, I won't. The only reason I say Times New Roman and 10-point font is to make it standard across everyone. And originally I was using a format for a conference proposal that I thought everybody would be possible to submit, but then whenever we don't do IRB anymore, you really can't. So in your paper, you have introduction, theoretical framework. It says a minimum of 7 to 10 articles. I think all of you had that easily by the time you got there. Some of you will need more, depending on how broad your study is. The theoretical framework should end up being about, I would say, 3 pages of your 7 pages. Okay? You're not going to have time to go, or space to go in depth a whole lot. Some of you needed to, from your original draft on the lit review, expand out from that. And I talked to some of you about having to find fields that were aligned with what you have. Let's say I know Regina's using Google Classroom. Google Classroom has some research on it. A lot of it's quantitative research. So if you have quantitative research, then you can still use that in your lit review, even though it's using quantitative methods for some of the framing behind it, and then your study is looking at it with a qualitative lens, and that alone makes it different or, you know, worthy of note. The other piece is if they don't have a whole lot of literature, like I know Joy and I had spoken about the fact that her field, that exact thing that she's working with, doesn't have literature on it. There's only a couple articles. So then maybe she looks at simulations as a whole and talks about simulations as a broad field, and then narrows it down to what she has. Methods, data, a lot of these you'll note you already have protocols for me, so you are just summarizing what you've done, or you are copying, pasting pieces out of that. Your data, discussion, conclusions, bibliography, appendices, reflections. Okay, the reflections you're actually doing for me in your Blackboard shell now, and so you can either copy and paste those out and put them into the back of your paper, or I will not dock you for having them not in here if they are in the Blackboard shell. So you copy them out. Minimum of 2 field notes. Those are just really summaries of what you've done when you're doing your observation and your or your interviews or anything like that. 20 minutes of transcribed video. Your document management file, which is just a straight insert from your one you turned into me. List the artifacts that you collected. Here's an artifact list example down on the bottom. And anything that you don't have room for in your paper. So if you collect a bunch of things and you are coding for, let's say in that paper I was coding for asking questions, and I had 17 instances where the students were asking questions, and I had 6 instances where they were providing more evidence, and I want to have a table of this, I can put it into my paper, but if that pushes me beyond the 10 pages, you can say see Appendix 2 and shove it in the back, and that gives you more space. So for those of you that are short writers, you can tuck things into your paper. For those of you that are really long writers, you can use the appendice to save yourself. And that was a really long way to answer your question. Did it answer your question? Kind of? Okay. I see a thumbs up. Any other questions? Okay, so then like I said, I need to talk to all of you sometime this week or next week. You have, technically this week and next week to finish collecting your data, analyzing, starting to write up. Week 13 is to finish writing it up, and then we have our little presentation where I'm going to have you do like 5 slides and talk for 5 minutes total, and that'll be it. Okay, so if you have more questions, you want to ask them right now when everybody else is gone, you can hang around, and if there's a couple of you, we can talk for a few at the end here, and I'll post the recording, and I expect you to get back to me with a time and a date that works for you. Giving me 2 times works better, and then I can tell you which one works with my schedule in case somebody already has me scheduled in for it. Okay? Awesome. All right, you guys have fun. Bye. If you want to stick around, you can stick around. Yeah, go ahead.
Could we schedule my time now?
Sure.
I mean, not do it, but schedule it.
Yeah, when works for you?
What day is it today?
Today is Tuesday, July 11th from me at 7:53 p.m.
Wednesday morning. So, would Thursday evening for you work at 8 p.m.?
Yeah.
Then I can, so that's 8 a.m. for me on Friday. Cool.
So it's 8 a.m. on Friday for you. It's 8 p.m. on Thursday for me, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, that works. You are scheduled.
So, would it be easy you'll send me a Zoom link?
Yeah, I'll send you one.
Cool. All right, we're sorted.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Tiffany.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Letha. I wanted to also see if I could schedule an appointment to speak with you next week, please.
Sure. What day works?
Can we do maybe Tuesday around 7:30?
Morning or night?
Night?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good. So next Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. So I have your number, so I'll give you a call at 7:30.
Okay, so that's the 18th at, hold on, my phone's going crazy.
Okay.
The 18th. I don't want to repeat it. We don't need to talk every week. It is, oh, that's why. Okay, sorry. It was giving me an all day. It gave me an all day click.
Oh, okay.
And I couldn't get it to give me a time. So 7:30 p.m. Okay, so Tuesday, July 18th at 7:30 p.m.
Yes.
Awesome.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks